It's time for the Hockey Minute, your source for all of today's hockey news with some opinion. Strap in for the fastest news in the NHL. This episode is proudly brought to you by fucking nobody. We don't have any sponsors. Now, here's your hosts, Brandon and Ryan.
Hey, I'm your host Brandon, and here with me as always is my co-host Ryan. And today we have for you the final part of a 3-part series on the NHL trophy race. Today we're going to take a look at the Lady Byng and Jack Adams awards, but first, let's start with the Bill Masterton Memorial Trophy. This award is given to the player who best exemplifies the qualities of perseverance, sportsmanship, and dedication to hockey. Named after Bill Masterton, the only player in the NHL to die as a direct result of injury suffered during a game. That's nice. Not nice. We're just going to leave that. Robin.
Kind of a
yeah,
dark,
exactly.
Dark.
Robin Lehner was last year's winner, and generally how this works is the teams will present their elected nominee for the Masterton, and then it gets awarded from there. The teams haven't actually haven't nominated anybody yet, so we're just going to go through and kind of name our nominees for who we think may deserve it this year. So, Ryan, who are you thinking for the Masterton?
Well, yeah, it's because you never know what guys are going through in their personal lives, and because every team has to push someone through. I mean, sometimes it's just a guy that had a bounce back year, but I was doing some research on this, and there were four names that stood out, and I'll just kind of go through them quickly. Jacob Markstrom plays, goaltender for the Canucks, likely the team MVP, but in November his father passed away, and he came back and he just absolutely stood on his head. I mean, the Canucks are in a playoff spot, or in the playoff hunt, I should say, mainly because of his play. Eric Holla, I didn't know this, but apparently earlier this year his unborn daughter passed away, and he still has put up 24 points in 48 games. Right. So that was kind of, I don't know if that was really noted. Stephen Johns for the Dallas Stars. Hadn't played a professional hockey game in 2 years due to some headaches, and kind of post concussion, and he got called up in January and has stuck around. And then the obvious one, and I think is likely going to win this, is Connor McDavid, just based on the story around it. But he had, that leg injury could have effectively ended his career, if not just changed it drastically. He came back earlier than anticipated. Still came second in the league in points, and really, he almost looks better. It looks like he whatever he did in that offseason, if you've watched the documentary.
Yep.
He comes back. He looks healthier. He still does the same stuff too. That's the thing. He still drives the net at full speed. And I get a little nervous watching him, but obviously that hasn't messed with his view on how he needs to play. So those were the four names that I think are kind of in the mix here. I mean, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you actually just reminded me about Stephen Johns. I'd completely forgotten about that story, and that's such a, 22 months being sidelined with post-traumatic headaches, and then to still make a comeback, I'm sorry, man, I would have given up. I'd have been like, fuck this shit. I'm going to do anything else because this is brutal. I've had a few concussions, and dealing with the post-concussion stuff is no fun, and I don't have a life that requires that level of physical activity, right? Like that's a climb that not many people can appreciate, and the fact that he did it just to give it another shot. I mean, he's obviously a fringe player anyway, right? It's not like he's expected to come back and be a star. He's just trying to grind it out and make it, and I just have so much respect for anybody who can pull that off. And by the sounds of it, he managed to come back and stay back, right? He wasn't in and out. So yeah, I mean, that's such a wonderful story. And then of course, yeah, you're right. I think McDavid is probably who I would nominate, just because I realize he's a star in the league and that people already know who he is. He's super prominent, but I don't think people fully appreciated the scope of the injury that he was dealing with, or the scale, and for him to make that recovery that we've all seen now from the documentary and come back, like you're saying, looking even better. It's hard to give it to anybody but McDavid this year. Yeah,
and like I say, it's one of those. I don't know how they even really vote on this, but all those guys that I mentioned just have great stories. Stories of tragedy and then overcoming, but I think that just based on the fact McDavid's star power to come back and do what he did, I mean, not quite on the level of Mario Lemieux coming back from cancer or anything, but
it's close.
When it is, because when you look at, when you say the name Connor McDavid, you think of his speed, and he had a severe leg injury that, like I say, it could have changed everything for him. He might have had to alter his game entirely, but like I said, it doesn't look like he's missed a beat. So I think he'll probably get the award. I think that for some of the other stuff, the Eric Holla thing, obviously that's tragic.
Yeah.
But just as a comparison, and I don't, we don't need to get into it too much, but as a comparison, Erik Karlsson had the same situation, and Erik Karlsson, I don't even think he was nominated, let alone considered to win the Masterton.
No, and it's such a hard thing to try and like compare grief, right? Like that's a really weird pissing contest. So I think it makes people a bit uncomfortable in general. But I think you're right. Like the scale again of what McDavid had to go through is just kind of unprecedented, at least for this year's candidates. One other one that I think we forgot to mention is I believe Marc-Andre Fleury's dad actually died this year as well, in November of this year. So sorry if you mentioned that before, but that's just another big loss.
I didn't have him there, but yeah.
Okay, perfect, yeah.
But yeah, no, I didn't. And I mean, again, you look at Vegas; they're still in the mix, and he's, Fleury's a reason for that.
He is, yeah. Although it sounds like he was kind of having a bit of a regression this year, but it could be age as much as anything, right? He's far on the wrong side of 30. I think he's 38 or something like that, right? 37, 38.
Yeah.
So he's kind of on the tail end of it, but yeah, he needs his due for that as well. All right, so that's going to take us to the Lady Byng Trophy, which is awarded to the softest player in the NHL. Oh, wait, sorry. No, it's awarded to the player who exhibited outstanding sportsmanship and gentlemanly conduct, combined with a high standard of playing ability. Named after Lady Byng of Vimy, the 40th Vice-Regal Consort of Canada, who donated the original trophy to the league. Last year's winner was Alexander Barkov, who is not really known for being a soft player, but you took the award anyway. Ryan, who's your choice for the Lady Byng?
Well, I take offense, first of all, that you called it the softest award. So I had, I don't know if you remember this, but back in like 2006, Esso, the gas station company, they came out with these medals, okay? And I was playing Bantam AAA that year, and for those that maybe don't know, that's the highest level you can go at the Bantam level. And it's physical hockey. And Esso, they had there was 3 medals. It was like basically the equivalent of the Hart Trophy, the most improved player, and then the equivalent of a Lady Byng. And, nobody wanted to win the quote unquote softest player. And I was sitting there at my end of year team dinner, and they said, the most, I think it was called like the most gentlemanly or something like that. And I'm sitting there, and I kind of knew, I'm like, man, I only had like 4 hits this year in like 50 games. So I kind of felt it was going to be me.
Oh, no.
And I just remember thinking, oh God, they're going to call my name. And sure as shit, they called my name. And I just, everyone was kind of like, oh yeah,
like, yeah,
way to go, Ryan.
We all knew. We knew.
Yeah, like here's a guy, just a giant pussy. So, but you know what? Hey, there's that was a medal. This is the Lady Byng. So, hey, listen, I narrowed it down to 3 guys, and again, we don't have the actual nominees here. So I did some digging. The 3 guys I chose: Braden Point. He had 11 penalty minutes this year. Had 64 points. Plays almost 19 minutes a game for Tampa. Then Austin Matthews, 8 penalty minutes, 47 goals, 80 points, is obviously the number 1 center there in Toronto. And Nathan McKinnon too, 93 points as we mentioned before, but he plays 20 minutes a game, or over 20 minutes a game. Only had 12 minutes in penalties. So
wow. Those
were kind of the 3 guys in the spirit of the award. It's kind of who has the most offensive output with the least amount of penalties. So
yeah.
Those were my 3. And I think if I had to pick, just based on the fact Matthews was in single digits in penalties playing, most of the year, still put up 47 goals. I got to go with him. I don't even really watch a lot of Toronto games, which is surprising because they're kind of forced down our throats. But I don't see a lot of physical play from Matthews, and he's a big guy. Like he's, comes in at about 6'2" or 6'3", it seems like. So
yeah, he's big. He's surprisingly big, I think. But yeah, you're right. He's a very, very soft player. Maybe it's the style that the team plays. I probably watch 20 to 25 Leafs games a year, and I watched. I'm sure Leafs fans will remember. I watched a game versus Buffalo. January, February. But it was like I don't think I saw a hit all game. Like it was like they're flying through the slot uncontested. It's just they'll maybe make an attempt at a stick check, but there's no physical contact. And maybe that's the way both those teams play, or maybe that's just the way the East is. As I'm not exposed as much to the East as I am in the West, but like I was blown away by how soft the game looked. It looked almost like an exhibition game. Like it was wild.
And that's a rivalry game too. Like you need.
Yeah.
You want guys to be blown up in those games.
Exactly. I'm probably going to be boring in my pick here for Lady Byng. It's hard for me to get away from basically the same arguments that I would have made for Ryan O'Reilly on the Selke Trophy. He's 10 PIMs all year, 61 points in 69 games. Like he's playing against the toughest competition, putting up great numbers, and still manages to keep out of the box. And he's still playing a pretty gritty game, right? He's not soft. I mean, St. Louis is anything. They're
No.
anything but, right? He's probably playing on the grittiest team in the league, and he manages to keep it wholesome. Maybe it's because he's got so many other teammates doing the nasty shit that he can kind of lay low, or like his cross checks don't look as egregious as some other people on that team. But yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to go away from Ryan O'Reilly. But one quick thing on Nathan MacKinnon, I didn't realize he had that few PIMs. Like he's just an absolute animal out there. I can't imagine him not getting penalized just for bumping into somebody too aggressively, right? But wow,
yeah,
good for him.
Yeah, that was surprising too, because you think about how fast he is, how stocky he is. I thought for sure he would have caught somebody. Yeah, they kind of call penalties nowadays where it's almost like you hit a guy too hard and we got to call you for roughing. And
yeah.
To see he only had 12 penalty minutes, I thought, well, geez, you got to think that's probably maybe a couple of tripping calls or something where, he's maybe a little bit out of position. I don't think he's had anything. I don't recall ever seeing an elbow or anything like that from MacKinnon. And
he's the perfect player to be that kind of dirty too. Like, it's like, oh shit, sorry, I'm I moved like a maniac. I'm sorry I accidentally clipped you in the face, but he's pretty controlled with his massive frame.
Yeah.
So, I guess we're going to move on then to our final award here, which is the Jack Adams. And the Jack Adams is awarded to the NHL coach adjudged to have contributed the most to his team's success. Named after the player, coach, and general manager Jack Adams. Last year's winner was Barry Trotz. Ryan, who do you have this year for the Jack Adams?
Well, you know what? We kind of narrowed it down to a few names. I'll tackle the West, the coaches in the West.
Sure.
And I had four. One guy's kind of a outside looking in, Travis Green. I mean, the Canucks are a dark horse playoff team. We talked before about Quinn Hughes, and obviously there's a youth movement in Vancouver, but I think that Green is the perfect coach for that anyways. Mm-hmm. He had a good career coaching in the Western Hockey League. So he gets a nod from me, but Paul Maurice in Winnipeg, considering the amount of talent they lost on their blue line, he still has them in a position. And I think that in a playoff position, I should say, but I think Paul Maurice really connects with his guys. When all that stuff was coming out earlier this year about the coaching, the Babcock and the Peters in Calgary, Maurice kind of, he touched on it. He said, nowadays you got to switch it up. And Paul Maurice has been around forever. Like, I think he coached Hartford.
Yeah.
So he was a part of that, back in the day when you could just bully your players. And now he's got these young guys coming in and he's finding a way to connect with them. So I give him props for that more than anything. Bednar in Colorado, second in the West with all the injuries that they had to keep players, and he still, got the most out of that crew. And then my last pick for the Jack Adams is Tippett in Edmonton.
Yep.
And that's a team that the last, you think about this past decade, how many coaching changes they've had, but the roster really hasn't changed. I mean, you still have your McDavid, your Draisaitl, Darnell Nurse on the blue line, Clefbaum, who is often injured, it seems like. I didn't, I mean, trading Lucic for Neal, okay, well, that's maybe more of a lateral move. But it's pretty much the same crew, and yet for this season, he's got, Tippett has come in and got the best out of that crew. So I think if I had to go with my pick, I'm probably going with Tippett on this one.
Yeah, and that's a fair pick. I mean, how many coaches have had a crack at that exact same roster, or basically that exact same roster, with little to no success?
Yeah,
and, somehow he's managed to bring it together. So I mean, that's definitely a fair pick. I mean, for me, I'll take a look at the ones in the East, and we'll start with Sully in Pittsburgh. And I mean, the job that he's done with the injuries they've been presented with is honestly nothing short of miraculous through the year, right? Like their total man games lost is right up there, but just the people that they've lost. I mean, like Brian Dumoulin, Jake Gensel, Malkin's been down, Brandon Tanev's been down, John Marino, fractured cheekbone, like Patrick Hornqvist with a knee injury. Like they're just absolutely depleted, and they managed to keep chugging along. I know towards the end of the season they were starting to falter a little bit, but I just think it's hard to ignore the job that Sully's managed to do there, keeping them all on track. And again, just like you were mentioning, for Paul Maurice, it seems like, despite being a bit of a gruffer guy, it seems like the guys really respect Sully in Pittsburgh. Like they really want to play for him. So, yeah, I mean, I had a brief, not personally obviously, but a brief experience with Sully when he was the assistant coach for the Canucks when Torts was here, and he just seems like a bright hockey mind. So I'm not exactly surprised to see how well he's doing in Pittsburgh, but obviously good to see. And then the second one that I'll get into here is John Tortorella for the Columbus Blue Jackets, and it's almost the exact same argument for guys that used to coach together. They're dealing with the same sort of thing for each team, right? I mean, Columbus has been completely depleted. Seth Jones has been injured for most of the year. Alexander Texier, Oliver Bjorkstrand, Nathan Gerby just went down. Elvis Merzlikins went out. Josh Anderson's hurt. Cam Atkinson's hurt, right? Like, it's just Jonas Corpusalo. There's no limit to their injuries. They're playing with an AHL or ECHL team, and somehow they managed to all bring it together. Like I heard Torts talking on a hockey show recently, and they were just asking him how he's done it. And they were giving him the compliment of saying, you've won the Jack Adams, you've done some great jobs coaching over your career, but this being probably your best example of coaching ever, like, how did you do it? And he was just saying, we've had a lot of great buy-in from the guys, and I think it's a really good example of how good a team can be when they play as a team. And I know that's cliched, but like you see it, right? I mean, when guys start to try and do the individual stuff, it kind of falls apart. And somehow Torts has managed to keep them all buying in and believing that they can be competitive, which is the biggest thing, right? Like, how do you go against a team of superstars when you're looking at the guy next to you and you can't pronounce his name and expect that you're going to be competitive? And somehow he has. Like, it's unreal.
Yeah.
So I think, and again, this is one of those awards that it's unwritten, but it generally depends on the team making the playoffs, like qualifying for the playoffs in order to even qualify for the award, which is something that we can't say for certain here. But I mean, even with all the uncertainty, I think John Tortorella would have to be my personal pick for Coach of the Year. Yeah,
and I think, I mentioned Tippett out west. I think Torts ultimately will win it because, like you said, not only did they have a lot of man games missed, but it's who they lost, too. You go from Bobrovsky, who won 2 Vezinas in Columbus in the time that he was there. He leaves. You got Artemi Panarin, who was the team's best player. He leaves. We talked about it just before recording, but I mean, there was one guy that I thought could take his team past that Tampa team last year, and that was Tortorella.
Right.
That's the one guy. That's the one guy in the foxhole that probably looks at a team like that Tampa team and says, guys, everyone thinks that we're screwed here. We're going to beat these guys. Like, he just instills that belief. And, he's kind of, I think he's that perfect balance between the old school and the new, because it seems like he really does care about his players.
Yep.
but he still has no problem telling, and you can listen to any, Nick Foligno's talked about it and Zach Werenski's talked about it. Like sometimes, Torts comes in a little bit hot and he kind of gets, kind of pisses you off, but you apply that. I mean, gosh, I work in an office. Sometimes, you're not going to agree with your boss, but they're still going to get the most out of you. And I think Torts knows how to push those buttons. So I would agree with you. I think Torts probably deserves the win, and he's taken that Columbus team that really, I mean, Columbus has been around a lot longer than I really give a lot of thought to. Hate to say it, but
right.
I mean, how many playoff series have they won in their 20-year history? They've won one, right? So he's made that team tremendous, and he's a Hall of Fame coach in my opinion.
Oh,
and I think
like he's the winningest coach in history for an American, right?
Yeah, and he's already got I believe he won a Jack Adams way back in Tampa.
Right, yeah.
Could be wrong. Could be wrong.
No, he's definitely won it before.
But he's my pick as well. I think he's just done a great job with that team.
Beautiful. Well, one thing I wanted to note actually quickly for Torts is with all the Me Too stuff that was happening through hockey, with all the different coaches kind of getting lit up, Torts was a name that never even got mentioned. And like, he's a guy that you would think would be prime for it, right? For abusing his players in some fashion, and it never happened. So it seems like he at least toes the line, or he's got his players so shit scared that they're never going to say anything because they know they're never going to play again. But either way, he's done a good job buttoning that down.
Oh, you know where you stand with him, and I think that's the biggest thing. Hey, since you're a big Canucks fan, though, the only Torts memory I have, really, I mean, because that was kind of a year to forget. But I mean, the game against Calgary where he was trying to take on every coach on that team. I mean, did you like that? Because I thought that was, if I didn't like playing for him before that game, I would have been running through a wall for him after that.
100%. No, I loved it. It probably wasn't, like if I put myself in the shoes of the Sedins, I imagine they probably didn't look at it like that. But me personally, I was thinking, hell yes, like that's exactly what you want. It's like finally some fire, right?
Yeah.
And then I loved his quote after. It's like, well, what were you going to do if you got in there? It's like, well, I was going to get him. So what the fuck that means? He was going to get him.
Yeah.
So right on. He was willing to go through Brian McGrattan to try and get at the coach. So, I mean, I give him props. Yeah, Torts didn't do very well here, but he was right. His whole message was the team is stale, it's old, it needs a big change, and it never came. So, I've still got a lot of respect for Torts. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that's going to do it for us for the end of our trophy series here. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the Hockey Minute.
Thanks, guys.
We'd like to take a second to thank you, the listener, for joining us. And a big thanks goes to our writers and production team, Jules, Mark, and Matt. We couldn't do this without you. That's going to do it for us. This is Brandon and Ryan. We'll talk to you next time on the Hockey Minute.